Today marks the first anniversary of the day that Donald Trump stunned pundits and pollsters by winning the presidency of the United States. To some, it probably feels an awful lot longer. There's a ton of debate about his performance so far. We begin, though, by taking stock of stocks. When it looked like Donald Trump had the presidency locked up, futures markets tumbled nearly 900 points. Stock markets were initially rattled by the uncertainty, but by the end of the night, there was a huge reversal. The Dow futures closed up nearly 250 points, above 18,500. That's the lowest they've been since. Stocks haven't looked back either. Despite a glaring absence of significant legislative victories and the possibility of a government shutdown in December, the Dow is up around 28%, and the broader S&P 500 is up around 21%. It's the seventh best performance following the last 23 elections. Franklin Roosevelt's take the top spot. The S&P 500 jumped more than 36% a year after he won back in 1944. The tech-heavy NASDAQ is up 30%. Technology and bank stocks have been the best performers. Even the TSX is hitting new highs. But there is a cloud of uncertainty hovering over key Canadian sectors. Trump's tough talk on trade is creating a gloomy outlook for one of the country's biggest auto parts companies. Linamar says it's preparing for the worst. Linamar released quarterly earnings after markets closed yesterday. It missed expectations. I had a chance to talk to CEO Linda Hassenfratz earlier today. I asked her how much of that weakness was related to demand and concerns over NAFTA, and how much was the result of those hurricanes back in the fall.
We don't see it as a miss in the quarter because we did have a lot of unusual things happening both this year and last year. So frankly, I was pretty happy with the quarter. We were up about 9% on earnings in a market, as you point out, that was down almost 8% in terms of production volumes. And again, as you correctly identify, it was largely to do with the hurricanes that were impacting sales and obviously production. So we're already expecting Q4 production numbers to normalize more so. Still down a little bit from last year, but more like 2 or 3% down.
If it was just the hurricanes, what is it that's happening that's weighing down on profits?
Yeah, I mean, we've had quite a few years of some nice growth in North American volumes, so it was largely expected to flatten off and actually be down a bit this year. So it's not really a surprise to me. It's just the market sort of stabilizing a little bit after quite a few years of some pretty decent growth. The next few years do look sort of stable.
Stability in as dependent on NAFTA and industry as yours is, I think a lot of people would sit at home saying, wow, I can't believe stability is something that would be coming into that industry. It's a year now since Donald Trump has come into the presidency. Where are we in terms of trade, in terms of concerns over stability, specifically in the auto sector and automotive parts sector?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of question about what's going to be happening with NAFTA. On the positive side, it doesn't seem to be impacting decision-making in the sector as yet, which is a positive. I mean, we're continuing to win business for our Canadian facilities. We're continuing to bid all kinds of contracts. And of course, we're also concentrating on growing our business globally. I mean, 80% of the world's automotive market is outside of North America. Right. So not surprisingly, over half of our business wins this year, 54% have been in Europe. But nevertheless, coming back to NAFTA, I think that certainly there's some contentious issues on the table right now that are an issue. And personally, I think there's a way for us to come to resolution on those issues, but it remains to be seen. So I think what we need to do is really just understand, okay, if NAFTA goes forward, what are the different potential scenarios of what that looks like? If it doesn't go forward, what are the scenarios there? And we've run through those scenarios, and we feel pretty comfortable that from a personal company perspective, we're going to be okay either way. What worries me is if NAFTA does go away, that the incremental effects across a whole bunch of companies is going to result in a negative economic situation overall.
A year ago, when Trump became president, I think just before he became president, you were quoted as saying, Mr. Trump...
Has it only been a year?
Yeah, I know, right? And it feels like it's been longer than that, and yet here we are. Mr. Trump is a businessman, you said. He will make fact-based decisions. How does that quote stand up in light of how these negotiations have gone? Talking about trade deficits and American-made provisions on the auto industry and the impact that these will have on the U.S. economy, U.S. commerce, and U.S. businesses.
Yeah, I mean, for sure it's a concern. I mean, certainly, if you look at the actual facts around NAFTA and the effect of NAFTA on the U.S., it has been significantly positive. There has been significant job creation. There are millions of jobs in the United States that rely on NAFTA. So the statements that NAFTA has not been good to the U.S., that it has cost the U.S. jobs, is actually not factually correct. So it is troubling that the administration is making these statements that are not factually correct. The question is, are they doing so from a positioning, negotiating perspective, and they really do understand the facts and are planning on making fact-based decisions, or are they, sort of buying into that rhetoric? I think that's a little unclear. I have to have confidence in the system and the administration and, a lot of really smart people in the U.S. administration that certainly would understand the negative implications to their economy and to American jobs of scrapping NAFTA. And I have to hope that they are considering those consequences as they're making their decisions.
Indeed, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this when we see you next. Linda, thank you for making the time today. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Linda Hasenfratz, CEO of Linamar.